Welcome, everyone. And I am so grateful that you're all here, going one by one through each of these pillars with me. It has been such a joyous experience, and I am really loving it. It's deepening my own connection with her. It's helping me to become more of a pillar. I've just been amazed at how many opportunities I've had to employ the pillars. I was on a conference call earlier this morning and something came up, and there I was speaking about this information about being in harmony and the pillars and how to do it. And one of the women on the call just went, "Wow, that's really great." And I began thinking about it and realized that this is a perfect example of what we've been missing, because there hasn't been, even though we've had the English version of it since 1955, it just sat on a back shelf. And it wasn't really brought forward. And it wasn't until the late 90s, early 2000, especially when Joseph Rowe translated LeLoup's version, that we really started to have anybody taking a serious look at it. And different scholars began to try to teach about the concepts and the ideas. And so now I'm hoping that this will help to launch it even more.
Hi, go ahead.
Hi, Eileen.
Is the, you're saying the 4 pillars, but I'm not seeing that structure in the book for some reason.
The be in harmony and take inspiration from the manifestation of your true nature is the sentence out of which the 4 pillars come.
Okay.
Out of that one sentence, the 4 pillars come. And this is what she, when I was sitting in meditation, what would you have me do? This is what she said. I want you to highlight.
Okay.
Really help to show people that this is like a pillar. This is a foundational part of how I was able to achieve what I was able to achieve. And why I won't go away, and why I am a force to be reckoned with, and all the wonderful things that we know about her, right?
That clears it up. It's not in the book. It's something.
No, it's not. It's the way that I've languaged it to kind of get people's attention. That
yeah,
and that's what's so powerful, because you take these 4 pillars and you dive into each one. Mm-hmm. And so for someone, it might be like, oh my God, we've been talking a lot about being in harmony, but boy, if you get be in harmony, you're halfway there.
Yeah.
But most people, have a problem with being in harmony. So
that's true. It's constant work. I mean, it's never ending for me to always try to be in harmony and be aware of my actions and all that.
This will help to launch it even more. I'm getting wonderful feedback from everyone, and I really appreciate all the comments and testimonials and things like that, because it really helps me a lot with being able to move forward. So, speaking of moving forward, we shall begin. So, pillar number 3 is manifesting the love of who you are. So, we are beings of love. We are sourced from love. We are the aspect of God that is us, is the love that we are. And we are really asked to become in more authentic alignment with that love. So, and she was a tremendous demonstration of that. Exploring the depth of her mysteries, she demonstrated how to awaken, and how to become what I love, this word that the Course of Love speaks about, which is the wholehearted state of love that Gospel of Mary Magdalene talks about, being fully human, being anthropos. So it's like completing ourselves in a whole way. Pillar 3, we're going to be diving in and exploring the actual steps to her awakening and ascension, which we've started to explore, but we're going to get the understanding of how she actually got past the ego. Because the ego is what is, they say the Maya, the illusion, is what we live in. We live in a dream state. And this is all constructed out of this idea in ourselves that we are separate from God. And so we create separation through our thoughts and our feelings. And she demonstrated and showed us how she moves through climates, the different climates. You know, sometimes there's fog on the ground, and then you go up the hill, and then there might be a dark, threatening cloud of a storm. And then if you get up past the cloud, you'll break into the sunlight of the Spirit. So, which they call the climate of peace. And the Course in Miracles is one of these places where the climate of peace is. So anyway, first we're going to review very quickly the Pillar 2, which was, Pillar 2 was dedication and focus. And we also learned about her meditation. So we're going to explore in a little more detail. We kind of touched on it at the end, but we didn't really get a chance to talk a little bit more in terms of what Jesus was trying to do in terms of their relationship. And then also this whole notion of that 7 demons were cast out of her. And then, which was really the awakening of her 7 chakra centers. So I think one of the strongest messages that Jesus is trying to say is that women are equal. And he tried very hard over and over and over to set this condition up. And it's a very important experience, but because the Course in Miracles is basically saying that the aspect of love that is God is in us as us, and there's no separation, there's no difference. So, okay. So now when Jesus was arisen, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene, and then they added the tagline, out of whom had cast 7 demons. You know, part of the reasoning they added that tagline in was because they're wanting to diminish her stature. Everywhere you look, you're always going to see a painting of her on her knees, groveling before his feet. And it's only the modern artists that we're starting to see her side by side as an equal. But the early Christian churches that we actually have, the papyrus texts of the first Bibles, were written in Greek. It's called Koine. Greek language is an ancient Greek language, and the word daimon is actually a word for God, godlike power and fate. And it has a connotation of good-spiritedness and happiness with it. So it's not like what we've been led to believe, which is that it's the same as Halloween demons. That translation or interpretation happened years later. I think it's more in the 12th century that came up. So this term later got its evil connotations, and it was in this particular Septuagint, I'm not pronouncing it right, probably translation of the Hebrew Bible, where they began to switch it so that it was more like a demon. Then the word Jesus cast out, the word is daistai. This is where a scholar comes in handy to get the pronunciation. So when we look at that word actually means to divide and distribute. So we have the daimon, which also has the da, which is the to divide part, and the distributing of fortunes. So what are they distributing? They're distributing this good-spirited happiness throughout her presence. We know this interpretation was the original interpretation also because there was a priestess named Diotima who was one of the teachers of Socrates. And she taught Socrates, and there's a famous lesson where she's explaining to Socrates the real meaning of the word daimon. And she's trying to say to him, so she's trying to explain to Socrates what is daimon. And daimon is that when this human body of ours, which we have this ego construct and everything, there is this aspect of the divine. as it is expressed through all of our centers of being, from the top to the bottom of our crown chakra and our root chakra. And so she's basically saying that this is the humanness aspect going into the power of the godlike aspect of ourselves. So as we evolve, so to speak, or as we grow in our these were the great philosophers of the world. They were exploring this whole thing. So we have two faces of God meeting each other, the masculine and the feminine, as equals. And I love this painting, even though they're still referring to this painting as her being the penitent one. And the reason I love this painting is because this is one of the few paintings of ancient time or older, Renaissance times or whatever, that is actually showing her on equal footing with him. So he's recognizing the divine in her, and she's recognizing the divine in him. And she's also showed and depicted as being very much the wealthy woman that she was. And that this was the truth of her being, that she was an incredibly wealthy woman. She and a number of other women helped finance this ministry. And she is here being seen, although they've got her in the shadows, she's still being seen as equal. And if you've ever had a partner or a friend who is able to stand and witness you for the truth of who you are, it's a very joyous experience, and it helps to wake you up when somebody's able to reflect you. So I have on my website, gospelofmarymagdalene.info, the webinar on the crop circles, but this was one that was formed on one of the feast days, and actually this was 2004. But the importance of this crop circle is that it shows all the 7 chakra centers really open. So if you look on the left side, you start at the bottom is the root chakra, and that is about survival. So that's the human condition of surviving and being able to, get along, manage your life. And that's where lack and limitation come into play. But if you're moving into the more expanded divine sense, you're in a state of abundance, and you understand all is well and everything is given and provided that you're needed. So then as you move up the chakra centers, everything that's human takes on a more sacred and spiritual nature. So sexuality, rather than just lust or procreation, moves into sacred union, the bliss of love. The solar plexus, the self-willpower, becomes the empowered will of God. I mean, in other words, you're recognizing that God's will and your will are not separate, they're the same. The heart of the human love moves into agape, which is love for all. And then the throat chakra is the block to self-expression, where we are cut off from speaking our truth, which is basically what has happened to the women across the world from the witch burning, is moves into the ability to speak our truth and to be free and courageous in speaking our truth without judgment, which she so beautifully demonstrates. And then the third eye is when it is blocked, there's a lack of intuition, a lack of being able to know. So you always have to check with somebody out there. Tell me what to do. Where do I go? How do I do it? It's like when they were interviewing people during the election, that coming out of the rally and said, "Now tell me, why do you want Trump to win?" And they were saying, "Oh, because he says he's going to fix it, like he'll take care of it." It's like, instead of me knowing what's my part and how do I play, and I have my whole contribution that I can bring to a situation. So the third eye is open, your intuitive ability to receive information from spirit is open, and then the crown chakra is closed to spirituality or open to spirit when we become awake. So these are very important parts of the ascension. Then we had also talked last time about the lesson on matter, and we learned that It's a lesson on quantum physics, and that we are all connected through what is now known as the string theory, where everything's vibrating, and when it forms into a solid, it becomes a particle, and then it goes into a light wave. And then there's this pulsation of happening of the light wave and then the solid. But so the bottom line of it is everything is energy. So, but whose energy is this that we're talking about? And that's a really important point to elaborate more, because there's a Qigong master in San Francisco, and you can Google his YouTubes, and he has an amazing ability. He was put in a contest up against some of the top karate leaders. And what happens is that when the people would go to attack him, he would literally take his finger and just point them to the ground. Nobody could touch this man. They could not even come close to him. And he would just send them back or throw them to the ground very gently. And he was talking about it later, and he was saying that if we're all one, and we're all made of this chi, this life force, this energy, and there's no difference, then it is my energy that I am seeing before me. Well, if it's my energy, then I can be the director of where it shall go and what it should do. And if I start to perceive that it is separate from me and that it can attack me, now I'm not speaking the truth and I'm not seeing the truth, and therefore that thought can cause me harm. But because I don't hold that thought, and I hold the thought that this energy is the energy of life itself that is before me, I am one in that life, I am connected to that life, therefore I can direct it to go wherever I want it to go, and I have no thought of separation. So this is where Mary Magdalene says, remember, be in harmony. Be in that unified state of being one with all. And then to be in harmony, LeLoup goes on to comment about this. He says, to be in harmony with our enemies is to skillfully allow their violence, which is basically their thought of separation and attack, to pass through us without contaminating us. So we're not going into agreement with that thought. We're not holding a vengeance. We're not holding an angst about it. So if you're perceiving or judging it that you're being attacked, then you are being attacked. Just by your saying it's so, it becomes so. So this is a really profound teaching. It's like, to really understand what harmony is, that you need to understand that there is nobody that's separate from you out there, and that you are in the heart, connecting heart to heart, because all we are and the only thing that's real is love. So with her really beginning to grasp and understand Jesus's teaching about this, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene outlines for us her ascension to become fully realized. And today's talk, unfortunately, not fortunately or unfortunately, is kind of a really super deep dive. It's like a ton of information that we will just barely scratch the surface about in terms of understanding. And as I dove back into it, I've gone through it a number of times now. I was still like completely. So what I've done is I've highlighted certain words in the passages so that you can understand what is the kind of the important thing. But basically what we're doing is we're following her footsteps, because when we live above the battlefield, that means we're living in harmony, we're living in peace, and she actually was able to successfully do that. I love this chart because it really helps to understand what's happening. So you see the cloud in the below the line experience is darker. And in A Course in Miracles, they talk about the dark, luminous cloud of fear. And when you come upon a big, huge, dark cloud, it does seem daunting. It seems like, oh my God, this is going to be intense. But if you were actually to go up to the cloud and put your hand through it, your hand would just go right through it because there's nothing there. And so that's what it takes. It takes us learning that so these ideas of judgment and being a victim and fear and all the kinds of things that we feel at the effect of reactionary things, hopeless, these are all what they call below the line phenomena. And what we're doing is we're learning how to be like what she was doing, where she was taking 100% responsibility. See, the Qigong master was taking 100% responsibility. There is no attacking unless you allow it. And so he just knew and held the truth, witnessed the truth, that he was one with the person before him, and that was the same exact energy as his. Not only that, the energy is connected. There's no place where the energy is not. It's all interconnected, as we saw in Pillar 2, the strings of attachment, connection through all energy is connected on some level with each other. Therefore, when somebody brought him, he could just pull him down, put him to the ground. So, but you do have to be in this area, this zone, you might say, of being above the line. And above the line means that you're a choice. You're having to choose it because you're 100% responsible for what you're seeing in the world and the interpretation that you're experiencing. And therefore, what you will also notice is by being at cause with this, you're experiencing abundance. There's a clarity that comes. There's an acceptance. And one of the gifts that I started receiving early on when I first started studying, like A Course of Love and A Course in Miracles, and not only was a greater, more profound peace and the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, but a clarity of mind, like to really kind of know in my mind, like where I wanted to go. I want to be above the line. I've had plenty of my lifetime below the line. And so I want to connect in love and share love and extend love and be able to respond, having the acceptance and love. So this is a good one to kind of look at and study more. Course in Miracles has their kind of version of it, because they're saying that the world that we're living in, which is the world based on fear, is coming from the egoic thought that we're separate. And we split off to know ourselves as separate because we wanted to have that experience. But the only thing was, we got scared and we thought that, that God would be mad at us or whatever. I mean, the Old Testament is full of the patriarchal God that's angry at the people. But basically, it's just the false evidence appearing real. So the thoughts that are held in mind are outpictured in the world. And the world is reflecting back to us what we're thinking, because we're in a co-creative experience. So if we can move into a point of choice, we can understand that we can choose. And this is what A Course in Miracles and A Course of Love is trying to say, is that we've now raised our consciousness enough on this planet where we've reached a point of choice where there's enough of us who understand that there's a choice of love or fear. So when we move to the point of choice, we can choose to be a part of this divine mind. We can choose to receive information, what they call the gnosis, the knowing that comes from the perfect mind of the all, the oneness, the Christed love of God, whatever, this area of climate of peace. And that one mind in its right-minded thinking outpictures a world living in love. And this is the journey that she made, was what was so extraordinary. So the bottom line is it comes down to love or fear. And when we are choosing that, if we choose fear, we can, at any point in time, make a decision to choose love and to switch. So that's when we become more fully awakened. We understand that we become open to spirit. We use our intuition to connect with spirit, to receive guidance, to speak our truth, to have love for all, to empower through the will of God, the right-minded actions, to join in sacred union with love and abundance. So those are the basic steps. So how did Mary Magdalene reach God directly? And there are two things that are important, and one is the role of the breath and the role of the feather. Now, we touched a little bit on the, I believe it was in the first pillar, about the role of the feather. In other words, they were saying about if our heart is as light as a feather, if our consciousness, and this is where forgiveness work comes in. And Eileen, you maybe next time we'll have you put your website up on our thing so people can find out more about the forgiveness work that you're doing, because that's releasing and clearing forgiveness is what will allow you to move into a state of lightheartedness, open-heartedness, and it makes your heart as light as a feather, and so it becomes easier. Remember, in the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, there's a disadvantage in that we have pages 1 through 6 and pages 11 through 14, which are missing. But because of the channeling that was done with this book that's called The Secret Teachings of Mary Magdalene, we were able to get some of this information. Now, I've gone ahead when different sections are missed, I just put it in brackets so you can see what the channeler is saying was the word that should have been in there. And to me, it makes a lot more sense. But basically, it's coming into this process of becoming anthropost. So anthropost is a place of wholeness. And when we're fragmented and split off and have separate aspects of ourselves, and we're vying to separation, we don't get to feel the wholeness and the connection with God. So according to the missing pages, it is entering in through the silence, because when we become still and know that we are one with God, and that's what she needed to do. She did that practice of stillness. So when I made the pillar number 2, I embellished the meditation part. So you may want to go back and play that meditation. And I will be doing a video just of the meditation alone, because I think that there is much that's there for us to garner about this stillness and being one with God. So understanding the nous, or the divine mind, is located at the heart. So we're in a culture and a society where we're thinking all the time, analyzing, judging, and whatnot. And the journey is to go into a wholehearted state. We've also divided and separated it as it's mind, body, spirit. And what the consciousness that we're moving towards is that there is no mind, body, spirit. There's only the heart. There's only love. There's only the wholeness of everything. So that's one of the things that she learned and was able to be a living demonstration of, which is what I love. So a good analogy for that is the oak tree. So a magnificent oak tree is fully human, is fully a self. We are this anthropos, both already and not yet, because we don't have our full humanness yet. So we're like an acorn. So contained within the acorn is everything that the oak tree is. The acorn does not become a banana tree. It becomes a oak tree. And so this is the beauty of understanding that there is within us everything that we need, and we don't have to worry because it's going to come to pass sooner or later. It's just whether you want to do it sooner or later. It cannot not happen because it's the truth of who we are, and the truth is the only thing that's real, and so that's where we're going to end up. But unfortunately, we've had difficulties along the way with that. So when the Gospel of Mary Magdalene came into my life, one of the things I really appreciated it was that it showed the threads of the original intent. Because this was, written shortly after the crucifixion. And so there is the documentation. And one of the key concepts that was outlined in it was that there is no sin. But this particular statue of Mary Magdalene and many others that came to pass are all showing her as what they call the penitent sinner, and she's not looking beautiful. And so these were kind of efforts to diminish her. So this is one of the quotes in the gospel on page 7. It says, the teacher answered, there is no sin. Because Peter was asking him a question about this. He says, there is no sin. It is you who make sin exist. When you act according to the habits of your corrupted nature, this is where sin lies. This is why the good has come into your midst. It acts together with the elements of your nature so as to reunite it with its roots. So this is the fact that we've chosen to experience our life as separate, and that we see each other as separate, rather than seeing the good in all, knowing that we are all a part of this elements of our nature. What is our nature? Our nature's joy, our nature's peace, our nature's love. It's all of those wonderful things. But here she is painted, as a penitent sinner. She's always being shown mournful, diminished, and not as beautiful and as attractive, certainly not as powerful in these paintings. The original intent ideas that are working through the Gospel of Mary Magdalene is Jesus was really trying to elevate the status of women. Being awake and seeing our oneness, having the eyes to see and the ears to hear. Over and over you'll see references to this. But this seeing is with vision that's not of the body's eyes. And that's an important point that, frankly, I haven't seen taught anywhere other than the Course in Miracles and the Gospel, the Gnostic Gospels. So Peter says to Mary, tell us whatever you remember. Tell us whenever you remember of any words he told you, which we have not yet heard. Now, he's often being misinterpreted by the scholars to be a nice guy here. Like, tell us whatever you can remember, what Jesus told you that we have not yet heard. Of course, she stands in her truth, and she says back to him, I will now speak to you of that which has not been given to you to hear. So that's a pretty courageous thing for her to say to a hothead guy like Peter, right? And that's the problem that Jesus was up against, because he was holding onto his cultural beliefs that women were less than, that he was not willing to really listen. He was not really willing to hear that we are all equal in spirit. We are all one with God. There is no separation. And because she wasn't caught up in that cultural belief, she was just extending her love and connecting with her beloved and wanting that greater truth to be fully a part of her and how much she could do it. And she had this deep, passionate feeling that we saw from her meditation that she was going to do whatever it was going to take. And she wouldn't even help Martha in the kitchen, you know, because she was so driven. She was a driven woman like me. I'm crazy like that too. I can't help it. I love it. So she says to him, I had a vision. And, you know, she's going to try to express to Peter what happened. So Luke makes some suggestions here and comments with us, and we'll just highlight a few of these things, which they will unfold as we go through the rest of the class today. That having the eyes to see and the ears to hear is basically requires accepting the invitation. So we have to develop an organ of subtle perception, because what we're seeing outpictured in our world is our perception that comes from the thoughts that we're thinking in the mind. And if we're in our egoic mind, we're going to see the thoughts of the ego. We're going to see fear happening before us. We're going to see lots of things that we need to forgive. But if we're in the right mind, then we're going to be getting guidance from the Holy Spirit. We're going to be feeling as what this organ of subtle perception is, a kind of feeling for the infinite open, without which the unveiling of true beginning is impossible. So we open up to that which we may not know. So there's an expression in the Bible, "Oh, hear Israel." And that was because there was an auditorial ability to hear, but the evolution was to move from the auditorial vision ability to hear the call of God, of Spirit, of the angels, to hear what the angels had to say, the messengers of God, to having the eyes to see, which is this visioning process. So in A Course in Miracles, they go into great depths. And I had really coincidentally, synchronistically, an amazing thing that the Course in Miracles lessons all this week were on our ability to move into true seeing, where we're not seeing with the body's eyes. So the body's eyes can only see the past and can only see separation. That's why when you look out, you see me as separate, and you see that there's time and space between you and me. To know oneness comes from the vision of our divine mind, which is the gnosis, which is actually sourced in the heart. They now actually have clinically, scientifically determined that there are more neuron receptor sites in the heart that act like a brain than the actual brain itself. So when we look at a chart like this of the structure of the body, and we can begin to understand the difference. When we are looking out, we're looking at light, and we are actually looking at the light of God. But we don't just leave it at that. What happens is the light goes in and it hits the back of the eyeball, and there's some optic nerves there that produce a chemical reaction that takes the impetus of this light and drives it up through the brain and searches through the brain for the memory of what is before us. So that means that it's looking for something from the past to reference what is standing before us, instead of recognizing that what is before us is the love and the light of God. And instead, we want to evaluate it, we want to interpret it, we wanted to judge it. So it goes to the back of the eyeball, and it makes this thing. Now, when I was, my stepfather had a stroke, and he didn't have a typical stroke where he fell down and he's, slurred his speech, and so the only reason that we knew that something was really off was because he picked up the fork at the dining room table and he looked at it with this completely baffled look, and he said to everybody, "What is this thing?" And he's talking about a fork, right? Because the part of his brain which tells him what a fork is and how you use it and what's it for was blocked from having had a stroke. So that's what we knew. So this is a really fierce conditioning to move from our natural inclination to judge and evaluate what we're looking at with the body's eyes to this ability to vision and have what is called true visioning. And this is where this light of the world, this light of brightness, is the real world, where guilt meets with forgiveness. So in other words, to really have true seeing, it requires, because we feel so guilty for our decision to separate ourselves from God, and we're afraid that God is not happy with us about this. And of course, everything in our religious upbringing, especially from the past, has reinforced that idea. We've had a really tough time with this. So usually people just will abandon and leave, or they don't want to deal with it. But the source of life, nothing perceived, forgiven, nor transformed, but merely known. So this is where we move into the gnosis of knowing that what is before us is this vibrant, illuminated light and love of God. And we want to connect with that. And the silence is the way in to be still and to know, through making ourselves and our heart as light as a feather. And that when we do that, with the breath, as light as a feather, we will come to know. So that's why in studying this work, it's so important to just slow down and take a moment and reflect and go in deeper than you've ever gone before. But what's happened is we have this confusion about the pull of matter. So we are identified with being comfortable, having the cookies, having good food, having a nice house. All of these things pull us away very subtly, but very sadistically, very, very much seducing us. There's nothing wrong with them in and of themselves, but other than that, our identity with it, which kind of interferes with and gets in the way of our ability to be able to know ourselves. So the breath is what we can use to help us. It is the breath which conjoins the soul and the spirit, which leads us to the nous, this divine mind. Between the two, the breath being lighter than the feather. So when we slow down and we just make our, not a heavy breathing, just a very light breathing, we find that we can get closer to our true nature and connect. And this is where the nous, or the divine mind, lies, the treasure, the real treasure that gives us everything. That's why she's called the woman who knows the all. That's why she's often painted reading a book back when women didn't read. She had the ability to see, the true seeing. And thus Mary turned their hearts toward the good, communion of the heart. And her being so in her heart was what was so profound and so amazing. So when we look at this simple diagram that helps us to understand what is going on, we see that in this top center, it's not like we can just hop, skip, and jump into knowing the all, because it's a place that's beyond any real knowing. It's what we call the point of choice. And so the egoic mind is based in fear, but fear is false evidence appearing real, so we can always shift our thinking to the divine mind with simply the point of choice. And when we make that choice to think the loving thoughts, to ask, how would you have me perceive this? Guidance from the Holy Spirit, which is the intermediary between God and us, that helps us to give us the guidance, and is based on love, then we will get the loving right thing to do, and it will cause a tremendous shift. And we need to keep breathing, and we have to remember a good sense of humor helps. So in the missing pages, this is where she's talking about we join that one breath and we become whole and at one. One breath meaning that as you're breathing in and you breathe out, breathing in is not separate and different from breathing out. It's breathing in and breathing out is all one breath. There's no separation for that. So we're breathing in and we're breathing out. And then the breath that conjoins life, death, and life at the midpoint, which is the heart, is called the noon of our being. And this is where the gnosis lies. Now, this is really because where we're going with all of this, and where she was able to go, and where the Course of Love is here to teach us on the planet to go, is that if we achieve what you might call a state of enlightenment, this idea of life, death, life, we stop actually, there is the potential to stop actually having any form of death, and then we just go into life. So, but that comes from being in the heart. And then once so there will be, what they're basically saying is there will be a period of time where we will enjoy the spaciousness of seeing each other, knowing each other, but knowing that there's no difference. We're not separate, we're not different, because we've learned how to forgive. And through that forgiveness, we've learned how to join. And we've been living from the heart. So our job has just been breathing, extending, and sharing love. And the Course in Miracles says that if there's ever a problem in any given moment that you're having, it's only the lack of love that you're bringing to that particular moment that is the problem. So we talked last pillar, we talked about the whole concept of matter. And so the four elements at the base, earth, air, wind, fire, are the elements of matter. And what we're doing is we're beginning this process of ascension. So we have to go into a point of neutrality. So we're not judging. We go vertically into the present moment. So we're not in the past worried about what you're going to do. And we're not in the future worried about what you might do later on. We're in this present moment where we're connecting to know ourselves as peace. And it's called the still point. And this is kind of a structural image of it that may be helpful to see it. So, as this missing page goes on to say, we are all aspects of the one life, the one being, the one whole, all aspects of life to be overcome. It is true that everything in our physical structure is composed and will decompose, and we will overcome. So the composing and the decomposing of the physical structure is an important idea, which we're going to elaborate on a little bit more. All that is composed is of the elements, earth, air, wind, fire, and our attachment to this structure is part of our problem. So disassociate your soul from matter. So the Buddhists talk about that, we become so attached that causes our our ability to move into an enlightened state. So it is through breathing or through the breath that we are able to transcend this. So once the two are apart, the ascent can begin. So that's a really, the breath sustains the soul and gives it life. And it is which detaches you from matter. So I have moments when I've been working with this material where all of a sudden I'll be given the eyes to see and the ears to hear, and I will totally get it. that it is, because I breathe, and this is where, when you Google in a concordance of the Bible, by the way, where does life begin? You'll come up with 12 passages, and they all are referencing the breath of life. So the body is minerals and dust, elements, composed of the elements that compose and decompose, right? And the breath is what gives it life. But there is no death, so there is no way that you cannot live. So the breath will sustain your soul, and it gives you life. And it's just when you got this really strong grip on matter, right? This is mine, my house, my car. And if you just let go just a little bit and just loosen the grip and just remember that I am here to love, I am here to share, and all is provided and all is well, and shift to that point of view of thinking, then suddenly you begin to rise and you get into what we start moving to having this ability to see. So it is through this nous, the divine mind is what the nous, some people say the nous, some people say the nous, that we see, for it is the eyes of wisdom within the soul. So, and we continue up. Now this is where it gets really interesting, because it is the vision of this, hold on here a second, of this divine mind that we overcome the without and within. And you remember the George Latour painting? Now, this is why I think George Latour had a copy of the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, even though, he already marked an X on the painting to indicate that he's a heretic. But this particular, he's trying to paint for us someone who has mastered this ability to know she is one with God. So she's overcome the without within. So there's no separation, right? There's the candlelight without on the table, and there's the candlelight within the mirror. But remember, the mirror was reflecting, when she was looking at the mirror in the previous painting, was reflecting her Christ nature, her Christ self. And we see the pearls laid down. Don't throw pearls before swine. The pearls are just thrown on the table because she's not swine. She's in a pure, and she's got the fleur-de-lis gold gilded frame. She's got her hands completely on the crown chakra of the Christ mind. She's got this one down. So I think it's brilliant how he was able to paint the expression of that passage from the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, which, who knows, they've only found tiny, tiny fragments, but it's like they ripped those pages out because they didn't want us to know that, we were to be able to ascend ourselves. So, and it is our breath that gives us the continued life so that we can detach from matter. And in the next pillar, next week, we'll talk about why this detachment didn't scare her. It frankly, the Course in Miracles says it terrifies most of us, the notion of detaching from matter. But she was able to do it without the fear. And we'll go into it a little bit more. So now we have her journey of her actual ascension, the way in which the steps that she took to actually rise up and move into her highest state of consciousness, where she knew she was one with God. And they call it her journey through the climates. So she starts in the darkness, and the reason why, even though the step of the darkness is one of the missing pages, in one of the pages that we have later on, it does mention that we begin with darkness. So that's why we know number one is darkness. So that turns out to be true in the channeled writing as well. Then we're going through the cravings and the desire, the ignorance, the lethal jealousy, which is our fear of death, the enslavement to the body, which is the power the flesh has over us, the intoxicated wisdom of foolishness, and the guileful wisdom of self-righteous materialism, which we have a whole nation of hoarders and people who are very much self-righteous about their stuff, and me included. So the darkness, this is the first one. And we're pulling this from the missing pages out of the Secret Teachings of Mary Magdalene, because we don't have this part in the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, but I think it's very apropos. The four elements at the base of the pyramid of being, earth, air, wind, and fire, must be transcended before the soul can mount to the stars. Why are you afraid of darkness? And Mary's soul answered, fear. Why do you hide in the darkness? I have known you in your power, but it is you who are afraid. See, she understands now there is nothing to be afraid of. And so she's able to talk about full-on beauty of her truth-telling. She's able to just look fear in the face and say, why do you hide in the darkness? You know, I have known you in your power, and it is you who are afraid. So, and that's because everything about what the ego is about fear, right? And so St. Francis of Assisi's prayer, she's mastered this one: where there is darkness, let me bring love. And all the expressions of love, truth, peace, happiness, joy. So then she's going to the next level, which is the cravings. I did not see you go down, and yet I now see you rising. Why do you lie, since you belong to me? See, when we have a craving for something, and this is what addiction is all about, boy, it's like, I come home sometimes and I know there's a leftover piece of whatever that I can actually hear it calling me. And I'm listening to the calling of my cravings, which are based on the ego, which takes me to the refrigerator, open the door, and respond to it, rather than going vertical and neutral and getting into my right connection. So Mary's soul answered, I saw you. You did not see me, nor did you know me. You mistook, and the parentheses is the part that's missing. You mistook the garment I wore for my true self, and you did not recognize me. After it had said these things, it left rejoicing greatly. Freedom from addiction, freedom from cravings, freedom from desires. Like Buddha spent his whole life trying to help us with freedom from desires, freedom from cravings. And here she is expressing the mastery of having done that. Why? Because I saw you. I saw what you were. You're an addiction. You're a craving. You're an aspect of that is not. But you did not see me, nor did you know me, right? Because she has now moved to neutral and vertical. She is moving into the center of her being and the truth of who she is. So the garment of false perception, the garment of I'm a teacher, I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a whatever the garment of identity that I wore, is not your true self. So you did not recognize me because the ego is looking at, well, are they rich enough? Are they good enough? Are they something I judge and evaluate as being the right kind of business, the right kind of work, or whatever that thing is. So she's saying, I saw you. I now know this is the ego talking. I'm listening to you, ego. I understand who you are. And you did not see me, nor did you know me, because the ego doesn't care about the love. The ego is not interested. The ego is only interested in being the ego and creating the egoic world of separation and pain and suffering and everything that goes with considering ourselves as separate. So she says, you mistook the garment I wore for my true self, because I'm out and about in the world, and I'm a teacher, and I'm a wife, and I'm in service to my community, and I'm doing things. So you're all hung up on the garment that I wore, and you did not recognize me, but I recognized you. I saw you, and I know who you are. So it's really great. She achieved mastery over addiction in one paragraph, right? And this Mary Soul said, why do you judge me, since I have not passed judgment? I have been bound, but I have not bound anything. But they did not recognize me. But I have recognized the universe is to be dissolved, both the things of earth and those of heaven. So you remember Jesus was talking and teaching that things compose, they come to particles, and then they decompose back to the roots of their true nature. So they become waves and particles, and composing and decomposing, nothing that is really real. So I have recognized the universe is to be dissolved, both the things of earth and those of heaven. So these are all constructs, ideas of our mind that are outpicturing materially manifesting into form, because we have this co-creative relationship. And she is ascending through ignorance because she has learned and she has come to understand not to judge. So that which normally bounds somebody, bring them down, get them to be heavy, connected, she is not bound to anything. So I have recognized the universe is to be dissolved. But she's not afraid of that, because the dissolving is that which is not real anyway. And it's in what she is so dedicated and focused on is love. And so that's what she's experiencing. And she's not afraid, because she knows and has accepted and has gone into this right relationship through the wisdom of her heart about the love. There's a lot more here that we could go into, but we're going to just move on, because each one of these is packed with deeper layers of meaning. So the jealousy section, the fear of death. Fourth is the zeal for death, right? The zeal for death, the enthusiasm for death, and that's what the ego has. So many people want to die. People have had suicidal thoughts. This is too hard. I can't do this. It's like, I want to die, And there's actually almost a zeal for death. And the ego is happy as can be when we move to our own relationship with that. So when in the Hyla section, when she actually learns not to fear death, and she transcends that through the what they are called the 7 powers of wrath, that would keep people fixed on matter and contained in fear. And she is able to transcend that. The ego is basically talking to her, and he's saying, where are you coming from, human killer, murderer? And where are you going, space conqueror, vagabond? So this is one that a lot of people have a hard time. Why is she being called a human killer, a murderer? And why is she being asked, where are you going, space conqueror, you vagabond? The ego is becoming dismantled in her world. And she is releasing and letting go of her relationship with the ego. And she's already come to understand and knows the truth of what the ego is. And she's making a different choice. She's going into a choice of love. And so the human killer is that, another word to say to it is, she's murdering the idea of separation. She's not clinging to the idea that we're separate. She's basically saying, you know, we've all split off, and we made our human form because we are an aspect of God, and we can have this co-creative relationship. So it's in a sense, the fact that we're now freeing ourselves from this construct, and this construct of our form exists within the space-time continuum. So we have space and time that are keeping us what appears to be separate. And we're moving about space and time, doing whatever we want to do in the relationship of space and time, but that's what the vagabond is. You know, the vagabond just carefree goes through life. And so she's killing the illusion. She's beginning to understand. So what binds me has been slain, and what surrounds me has been destroyed, and my desire has been brought to an end, and ignorance has died. So she is free now, because there is no death. And I put this little picture of the bike here because when I was 12 years old, I had a near-death experience. And I was riding on my bike trying to catch up with my friends, and I was riding top speed. And I fell off my bike and I crashed. And the next thing I knew, I was out of my body, and I was looking at my body down on the ground. And I remember that was really curious to me, because while I was out of my body, I wasn't worried. I felt whole and complete. I felt like there was nothing missing. Everything was fine. Everything was great. And so I was like, wow, there's my body down there. I was curious. And I was free from the constructs of the body. But the Course in Miracles says that the purpose of the body is for communication. So my friends were trying to help me. They were pulling me off the side of the road because it was a rush hour traffic time, and they were afraid I was going to be run over by another car. And so when I wanted to communicate to them that I was fine and there was not a problem here, although I was very curious why my body was down there and I was up here, they were looking at the. I realized I couldn't communicate with them, you know, and so I had to go back into my body, and then the body's a vehicle for communication. That's what the purpose of the body is. So it allows us to reach out and communicate with each other, which is very handy. And we also get to enjoy some many other wonderful things too, as well. So in this ascension journey, in a world, I was set loose from the world, and in a type, from a type, which is above, and from the chain of forgetfulness. See, the biggest problem that we've all had moments of clarity. We've all had moments of peace. We've all had moments of love which exist in time, and then we forget them. So this is one of the tools of the egoic mindset. This is one of the tools of separation, is this chain of forgetfulness. So from this hour on, and for the time of the due season of the eons, I will receive rest in silence. So she is saying that I'm going to rest in the spirit. I'm going to rest in the love. I'm going to rest in the connection. And that's what she does. She enters into the silence. And so the next thing that he says is that Mary said these things and she was silent, since it was at this point that the Savior had spoken to her. So she has gotten to a place through the vision that she had, where she was able to ascend through all these levels of the egoic world until she could get herself up to the place where she knew she was one with God. And at that place, everything that was guiding her, informing her, was coming through this Savior, Jesus, God, consciousness, Christ, mastery, Buddha nature, whatever you want to call it, was speaking to her and informing her, giving her everything that she needed to know. But of course, as we had read last time, Andrew and Peter, they did not understand this. They didn't get it because they were so attached to matter. They were so attached to their belief structure that women are less than, women are not equal, and so they could not go there. They could not get it, and so they just turned around and attacked her and said some pretty mean things to her. So even though he started out saying, come on, tell us what we know, because they could see, that something was happening with her, that she seemed, if somebody's truly hidden in an enlightened place, their energy, their presence of mind, their being is just so extraordinary, right? But unfortunately for all of us, and 2,000 years later, so we just review that it is the breath which conjoins the soul and the spirit, which leads us to this gnosis of the divine mind between the two. The breath lighter than a feather, which can help us to realize our true nature, our otherness from matter. So it's really trying to get into our true nature. And of course, by the end of her life, she was in a full, she just lived in a state of bliss, fully illuminated, fully enlightened. And the Course in Miracles in the teacher's manual says that there are those who have seen the face of God directly, who retain their ability through their personalities to be able to interface with us, and they will do so when it is called upon or necessary, unless it will frighten us. And so that's why recently, it started probably in the 80s or early 90s, after the Harmonic conversion, we started to see women who were having apparitions of Mary Magdalene appear to them. Mother Mary's been happening for a while, but Magdalene was not as frequent. So, and then more and more, I just met with a woman from Germany who's got a big Magdalene following, who came through Marin County here. Magdalene came through and spoke to her, and she was telling me the experiences of it and really connected her with the angels. And just sitting in her presence, I could tell it was true. She had such a lovely, lovely, sweet energy about her. So she's going to come back next year, and she's going to be doing something with us. So I'm looking forward to that. because it's like that's what's happening, is there is this call for us to be our own divine self and to stand in it. And so this is a wonderful painting of Mary Magdalene in full regal. She's got the green clothes underneath, which is the clothes of fertility. She's actually looks slightly pregnant there. And then she's got the red of the royal garb, and then the white for the purity. So at Easter, we always dress in the red and the white, symbolizing her. And just to be able to have, you remember that we talked about the Temple of Diana, the seventh wonder of the world, and imagine being a little girl and being taken by your mother up to the temple. So we do need to build a temple. We need our temples back. See how the temples are open? You have a pillar on one side and a pillar, and there's, it's like that openness, the welcoming that happens from it, and then to be able to, for us to see those who've achieved a certain level of consciousness demonstrating and standing before us, so that we too can become fully awakened and have all of our chakras opened up and blown to full glory, so that we can have the presence of mind. In this ascension process, I went through and looked at, the ancient chakra system, and there's interesting correlations, because the base chakra is connected to the smell. You would think it would be more like the throat chakra or something, but it's the base chakra, and it's connected to the rose. And what I discovered is that the scent of the rose removes resistance to ascending. So that's why a lot of these, like Mother Mary and whatnot, there's people will say they had the smell of the rose suddenly filter in the air, and when she appeared, they could smell it beforehand, or they knew her presence was there because suddenly, and unfortunately, the commercial marketing of roses in America, they have taken through the DNA structure and removed the smell of the rose. So you have to have a garden rose by a master gardener who knows how to put the fertilizer in to bring the scent back. And that's the scent that opens the heart and begins our process of ascension, which is really important. And then the second chakra is having to do with the taste and the breath. And because we breathe, and when we breathe fully into our belly, and into our power center, and then we go into the solar plexus, which is the restoring of the feminine Christ, our power center. So we are not to become, like, unfortunately, we see so many women who are finally breaking glass ceilings and getting into powerful positions, but they are only modeling the patriarchal domination and control over model, instead of going into and modeling the feminine Christ, the caring and the sharing. So you see the waters are being spilled out onto the dry desert land, because this is what the feminine does. It's the caring for nature and water, and the opening of the heart, and the coming into the truth of our being, of who we are. And of course, the heart chakra is full of fire. It's when we reach out and touch. And it's also the chalice where we hold this eternal flame of love. It's an ancient flame. And so reigniting that, and so that we can share it. And she's often painted with the chalice cup in front of her heart. And you see the Holy Spirit is over her shoulder, informing her. And she's got the symbol of peace in her hands, so that she's a fully embodied, fully enlightened being, blessing all. And then the throat chakra, the hearing, this is what has been cut off for us. because it's listening through the silence. It's listening through the silence to receive the instructions of how to express who and what we are in the world. And then we move into the third eye, which is the sixth sense. So the lower chakras were related to the five senses of our body, but now we're moving into the sixth sense because we need to have that connection with our higher minds and the universal love and the spiritual will, and be bridging ourselves, connecting ourselves. And Course in Miracles says that God will actually reach out to us once we open. You know, all is done with permission. We give permission. And everybody has it within themselves. There's no person who is denied it. Everybody has it within themselves. And then it leads to what the Course says is a journey that is very gentle, customized awakening experience. But you have to say, okay, I want to know more. I'm in the question. Help me here. How do I do this? How can I serve? What is it that you would have me do? And in the most delightful and wonderful ways. So I know that for me, having an integrated, wholehearted, inclusive, heart-centered path is going to wake me up way more than some other experience that somebody else has. So that's what I'm finding has been so important for me to do and to have in my life. So we have this gentle awakening. And then we have, of course, have the practice, because we're going from the human and we're moving into our diamond, our higher self nature. And so understanding when we're in survival, how do we get to the feeling of abundance? You know, when we're in the human heart, how do we get to the agape love? When we're in all these different ways. So we go through the cosmic consciousness meditation. We practice our own beautiful process of awakening and ascending. And we do that through joining. And that's why we have rituals, and that's why we have sacred ceremonies, because we have a world that's devoid of a lot of that. The anointing, just bringing the anointing back. Oh my God, I remember when I went to one of my first goddess circles here in Marin County, and this woman was me. We were doing it every week. And every week she had everybody anoint each other. And I thought, oh my God, this is so wonderful. It's just, as Matt Kahn was saying one time when I was listening, what a true master is one who blesses. And so anointing is just a tremendous way to bless somebody with a high ideal. So that's what we do as we move through our own ascension processes. We behold the Christ in each other. We learn of our equals, high-spirited, high consciousness, higher frequency, vibrational place of being love. And then we'll start to see outpictured in our world, a world living in love where there is nothing to forgive, because all is forgiven. And because we are not experiencing ourselves as separate, we're experiencing our eternal oneness, our interconnectedness. So we are coming to understand that we are the breath of life. We know who we are. We are learning to accept that we are holy, and that's why we're ordaining women as priestesses, to encourage them and give them support to understanding that they are holy and being seen in that light, which then leads to them becoming fully integrated anthropos beings, humans, both male and female, being joined together in the Shakti Shiva experience of wholeness, rooted in love, connected to the cosmos, speaking and carrying forth the truth in a centered, balanced, and peaceful way. So It's not difficult to look within, for there are all visions. That's where all visions start. So, but we're not encouraged to look within. Although most gurus will say, go within, go within. So we enter in through the silence. We take a breath. We allow our breath to become one. Move into that choice to know through this experience that our true nature is love. And as we come into that love, with our enlightened imagination, what inspiration is manifested out of your true nature. And this is what you get to create. And there's a whole section in the Gospel of Mary Magdalene where LeLoup is talking to us about and commenting on what he feels Magdalene was able to achieve an enlightened imagination. So by understanding what is our true nature and being in a co-creative relationship, being informed by spirit. After she tells her vision to Peter, it then says that Mary arose. And when we look at the word arose, because it was written in Greek, it's anastasia, which means to rise again or resurrection. This ability of hers to stand as a pillar of love. She's often referred to as being the tower of strength. She is a conduit of enlightenment. So because she, in her own way, has been the living demonstration, and this is what has brought me the greatest joy of doing these 4 pillars, is that it's really caused me to, as I'm preparing the material and putting the slides together, is to really focus in, listen to her words, resonate with them, not do it in a rushed way, very gentle, soft way, learning how to access and become this pillar of love. And then, of course, she embraced them all and began to speak to her brothers. And Mary turned their hearts toward the good. Because as the Gospel of Mary Magdalene talks about, they were all terrified about going out there. They didn't want to get crucified. They all ran away from the cross. She and Mary stayed at the cross, right? They had the courage to stay. And because she'd actually achieved this state of enlightenment, she was full of grace. And with being full of grace, she was able to embrace them all and began to speak to her brothers. And Mary turned their hearts to the good. So the word gospel means good news. It's like we are to spread good news. So anyway, I'll just stop right here. I don't know if you have any questions or comments or things that have sparked for you. And you want to share anything?
It's very beautiful. I'm just really appreciating how powerful this is, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of amazing, too, how a very simple tenet, be in harmony, take inspiration from the manifestation of your true nature. It's like when you expand it and wrap it around her whole ascension process and the steps that she took in her ascension, you see that it's quite profound and quite deep, and it's like something very, very simple, but not so easy maybe to do for many, and certainly not something that we've embraced or really taken a deep dive and looked at. And I tell you, every time I do look, every time I do these things, I just find it touches my life. And I was talking a little earlier today, it's like I've been pulled into a couple of mediation sessions recently where people were having conflicts, and because I'm so infused with all this be in harmony, take inspiration. I'm like able to like, it just like comes right out of my mouth, you know, because it's the nature of my being, because I'm in right alignment, because it's like, it's informing every cell in my body is, you know, starting to wake up to. And I was talking to one woman who was having a horrific time with her teenage son, right? Big fight that morning. And after I shared with her just some really basic things from what I had been researching in my preparing for the thing today, she's like, wow, is that helpful? So, like, and I have found that it's almost like a vibrational thing. It's like I get imbued with this vibration that it's a lot more joyous than the egoic, judgmental.
Well, I think that these are places, as you're, reviewing them, and like the breath and choosing love over fear. These are things that I think are very familiar. I feel like I've definitely touched these places and those moments, and probably most people that are listening to this and viewing it would recognize them too. But there's something, it's just a way that it feels very affirming and reinforcing that yes, this is the path. Just stay on it. It's like, because you do have those moments of where it's just very clear and it's all love and you just feel the oneness. And then, the next day, your 13-year-old kid is driving you crazy, right? So it's like that whole...
forgetfulness, right? One of the major tools of the ego.
Right. So I think that it's really powerful, first of all, to have this framework. And secondly, to have a community of people who are really holding this and supporting each other in the truth of this.
Exactly.
Because, it's just to go so that you can take it to that, I think now it's like a process of integrating it, remembering, like you're saying.
Right.
And just having this be a way of life and something that we can tap into and, live from, really.
Yeah. Well, I think you hit the nail on the head when you're saying, because there is a growing body of members of our group that have been calling for this and have been they want to be with other people who are willing to be above the line and who are committed to it, who have the skills so that when they fall below the line with something, they recognize it right away. They go to the point of choice and then they choose once again to be in a place of love or forgiveness or compassion, and they move back up because they're not interested in the dark, gloomy, mucky waters of the below the line experience. They really do. It's just like every year when I create the Easter event, comes this moment at some point somewhere where I just go like, oh my God, why are we not doing this every day? Why are we not? And of course, this is what Pillar 4 is going to be about. This is what the walk forth is. Pillar 4 is walk forth, and that's the next Wednesday, which will be the last one. This is amazing, and I
forth. Great, that's it right there.
Yes, creating heaven on earth. And how is this integration of these ideas and how to keep them alive in every moment? Because the one thing about living in the world of duality is that it's so true what Eckhart Tolle says, the power of now is all that matters is right here and right now. And right here and right now in this moment, there is enough love between all of us. And we can open to it and we can claim it and we can have a moment in time, a slice of heaven, as my former boss used to say. Now, that was a slice of heaven, right? After a horrific work day. He would always affirm that there was a slice of heaven in there somewhere. And but it's in the joining it's in the gathering of what we call the forerunners, the ones who are resonating. They have come to a point in their life where they're really hearing the call. They're feeling that desire, and they want to join with others. And then as more and more of us join, it will continue to expand and grow. And, we've been having others joining on the archive lines, so that's been great. They haven't been able to do the live one, but it's okay, because, and I'm getting lots of great feedback but they're feeling connected and a part of, and we'll get together and gather if we can for some of the things that we have, which is peace. May peace arise and be fulfilled within you, which is what we get to look. And we have the birth and the rise of the divine feminine. I don't know if you saw this picture of Diana with the blue light over her heart, but this came from the vision that I received to do a ceremony honoring Mother Mary. And Diana said that she received in her meditation that she was to actually do a blue light meditation. And I was researching, trying to find some pictures for this slideshow, and I came across this picture of Diana with the blue light on her heart. And she's in the bridal chamber, and she's truly in her altered state of her, place of wholeness, her anthropo state of mind. And it's amazing. This blue light was cast over her heart area. So that's what we'll be doing. We'll just be loving each other up and blessing each other and infusing this return to love so that we can let go of the forgetfulness and we can get more and more grounded in this greater truth. And then someday we'll have a temple to walk into. So I'm hoping you all can join us. And then, of course, we're going to be launching from that day the priestess training for coming up in getting ordained in October on Columbus Day weekend, which I think the Columbus Day weekend, those dates on your calendar, because that would be fun to have to Mary Magdalene and stand and be witness for our divine self. Starts on Friday, October 11th, and it actually ends on Monday. If you want to stay the whole time. And it's a bed and breakfast, the Isis Oasis, so we can share a room and
so the 11th until like the 14th?
Yeah. So anyway, thank you so much for joining us. And we have a few more minutes if there's any comments or questions that you want to mention about it. I can't believe that we were actually ending a few minutes early.
There's so much that you went through today, and I just
yeah.
Like I said, I really appreciate it. And that one of the themes today about the breath, because I've been feeling that very much, that it's so simple, and it's just a matter of really continuing to come back to the breath and strengthen it. And that just seemed like huge in the teaching today, that's really the gateway. Right. So I really love that.
Yeah, and I think the breath is also a tremendous tool because we have two nervous systems. One triggers fight or flight, which is totally from the ego side of things, and the other nervous system triggers peace and calm, a feeling of calm. And so and it's the breath that takes you into the peace and the calm.
Right, the parasympathetic.
Yeah, so if you can get into the parasympathetic nervous system through the breath, and then just take a little time so that as you're taking a breath in, and when you're at the top of the breath, it's not stop and that hold it or anything like that, but it it just like dives right into the down part of the breath, and the rise and the fall of the breath is actually one wave, continuous wave. There's no stopping and starting. It's just like, so that's what, and then as you practice that breathing, so you're just breathing in and then letting it go when you get up at the top, but it's not like a stop and hold and let go. It's just like a letting go and then coming back up and letting go. And there's no separation as one breath comes in and one breath goes out. And it's just going in and out. And then you move to making the breath as light as a feather. So it just becomes lighter and lighter and lighter. And that, doing that will bring you into that place, that consciousness of being at peace. Because when she even talks about the listening for the silence of the breath, and the silence of the listening for the silence of the breath. It's like so funny the way that they're playing with all sensors. You think you're hearing is listening with the ears for noise, right? But it's not. It's actually that you notice your body's breathing. You feel your rise and your fall of your chest. And you just put your attention on that breath and you just follow it into oneness, into wholeness, into wholeheartedness, into peace. Yay!
This is beautiful. It's exactly the place from which I believe forgiveness flows, is when you can relax your body and you want to you're coming back into that peaceful place. That's the best place.
Yeah.
Access that release.
Exactly.
Of whatever it's been. And yes, I'd be happy to share with you next time if you'd like. And
well, my next webinar that I'll be doing after this one is going to be. It's going to be. I can never really say, because it's kind of like I wasn't planning to do the 4 pillars, and then I heard you're doing the 4 pillars. I go, okay, tell me what to do. How do I do this? And then here's the 4 pillars, right? Be in harmony, and all these ideas of dedication and focus. You have to have the discipline of the mind, but it's the discipline of the right mind, not the egoic mind. So you have to make that choice and come into right alignment, and then you go into the practice of compassion and what we're doing today. So anyway, I'm going to go through the whole Course in Miracles, and I will be because I have the whole book from the beginning to the end. Every time there's a place that is straight out of the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, I've marked it. So I'm just going to be taking the book and I'm going to be going through it. Because I think that's a body of work that would be really wonderful, because what grieves my heart is that here we've had such a master, such an amazing woman who is so powerful in her teaching, right? And in her presence and in her relationship with Jesus. She mastered the experience of the equal with him, and he met her there, and that's extraordinary. How many couples do you know today in your circle of friends who truly have equality, level of mastery and love with each other? I know there are couples that are out there exploring it, and we're going to be doing some work on the February 22nd on the Enlightened Partnership, to look at how is that going for them and have them share about their experiences. But, when you think that when my mother was born, women did not have the right to vote, in the 70s, when I became adult women did not have the right before that time to own money in their name, a credit card, and now we have that right. And we still don't have a ratified Equal Rights Amendment. We still don't have the right to our own health care voice. We still don't have equal pay.
Oh, the right to make decisions about our reproduction.
Yeah, we still don't have
fully. I mean, we have some rights, but not 100%.
Yeah. And we have so many relationships, so many marriages where a woman is really having to look to her husband that he's still, I mean, even Mike Pence just said it, you know, woman has to be submissive to his wife, who he calls mom, his mother, his wife. So you know who wears the pants in their family, but
when will the Course in Miracles program, when will that be?
The one that I'm doing in the webinar, it's going to start right away. I'm going to start, you know, set a regular time, and it won't be as long, just so I can get it recorded and dock it and put it together and start working on it, because it's a body of work that I think people would really appreciate if they knew how much she already, that's why I love that we have the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, because we have the papyruses. We know this is what was documented that she said and did. And so we can say, and then here it is mirrored 2,000 years later in A Course in Miracles. Oh, that was the original intent. Oh my God.
At any rate, but then that got me going over to Meister Eckhart. And I'm like, then the connection with Meister Eckhart is Jung took most of Meister Eckhart's work, and Meister Eckhart's a Dominican, which I am, and has brought that to that's Carl Jung's work. So that connection of the liturgy and Carl Jung and the symbolism, Mary Magdalene, and this whole, and I understand, you know, not being attached and all that, but the liturgy, I'm trying to, there's something I can't connect with, and I'm trying to figure it out. It's something so deep that probably so simple, I just am not getting it. I'm missing something.
I don't know if you've participated. Rosamont Miller does with Elizabeth Kelly, who ordained me, a Eucharist down in, I think they're in Redwood City area. She has a Gnostic church there to the Magdalene. And
right. I think I saw that.
And that's one. And then, well, you know, the liturgy has contained within it some of the original threads of the sacred message. And that unfortunately it's gotten watered down or diluted or written. So we will be going into it even more so after we finish this, the 4 pillars. Then I'm going to start a regular weekly thing, because I have the Course in Miracles book all marked up as to where every time the Gospel of Mary Magdalene appeared.
So thank you so much, Christy, for sharing it.
Yeah,
the depth of wisdom and knowledge, and it's just really wonderful.
Thank you
for doing this and making it available.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I appreciate being joined by all of you. So, all right, and we'll see you next time. Well, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. Blessings to you all.